Today we're going to show you how we make our multi-hole tubing. I've webbed this together just now on the bench. Go ahead and chuck this up and get going on it. You can see the bundle that we use. For the riptide stuff specifically, we use 6 tubes around 1 rod. And then, but you can do whatever kind of combination you would want to do with it. Get this warm here. I'm going to move the Bunsen down here for a quick minute, because that's where we'll be working next. And so I've webbed these together, like I said, but what I'm trying to do is section off the channels from the voids. So we want to vacuum out the voids, any voids, but we want to keep the channels open. So it's a little bit different than a vac sack in that respect, but pretty similar in other ways. I have a vacuum in the tailstock. I do have air in the headstock, so I can blow this out and do the seal. And also, if the channels start to get a little small, I can puff into them and open them back up. So you want to make sure that you don't have any air leaks. If you have any air leaks, the vacuum will then vacuum out the channels. I'm just going to work the seal nice and hot. Make sure it doesn't get puffed out too much, because we have to put the 50 mil tube over this, so you can't get that puffed out any more than the rest of it. Good. And I like to use hose clamps to keep these bundles together. I used to use rubber bands. I found it leaves a little bit of a residue on it, and they also can't take any heat. These hose clamps can take a little bit of heat. They're a little bit harder to get off than rubber bands, but they can take more heat, and they don't leave any residue for us at least. A little warm. So the seal was still a little warm, and so when I went to go push this Maria, it got off. Definitely want to keep everything warm on these. Just kind of unstable seals and manifolding the tubes together and whatnot. Down here, we want to work this Maria in and make sure that all the tubes are tagged to this hub, this manifold that we're creating. And that'll keep all the tubes together when we heat down here. If we heat down here and this isn't connected, then they'll start to spread out. Okay. Now we can go ahead and take the hose clamp off, and we'll get the piece of 50 mil chucked. Sometimes it can be a pain. There we go. Okay. Okay. All right, it looks like the Bunsen slumped our bundle here a little bit, so I'm just gonna get it back before we put the tube in. Actually, I don't even think the tube will fit right now, so. There we go. I'm going to bring this tube out a little bit more. Lock it into place. Okay. Okay. Go ahead and work on this seal down here. So we're going to seal the piece of 50 mil to the Maria that we had already made on the 32. And now you can hear this kind of clanking around a little bit. Once you heat it up down here and loosen it up, it'll tend to want to do that. I don't worry about it too much. That's why you want to use a tight fitting sleeve so that it doesn't have a lot of room to move. Once you have that sealed, you can start to heat it up with the Red Max for the vacuum. This seal right here is a little bit unstable, so we want to be careful of it and keep it warm. But obviously, when I stopped the lathe, this Bunsen slumped it, so that was keeping it warm enough. If it can slump, then it shouldn't crack. It should be warm enough. So once you get it going, get it back down, then you should get a rhythm going, and yeah, shouldn't have any issues with cracking. So far, so good. So we want to keep the Bunsen down here for a little bit because the hub we kind of created to seal all the tubes together, that was really warm, and this piece of 50 mil was sitting at room temperature. So just the shock from that could crack the piece. So we want to get the Bunsen on it and make sure that that's nice and happy. Then we can continue to work down here without any issues. And so I'm just pulsing the vacuum, and I'm holding it on for maybe 10 seconds, and then I'll reheat for maybe another minute. If you keep the vacuum on too long, it'll want to close up the channels. So it's kind of a balance between vacuuming enough to get the voids out, but not too much to start closing down those channels. And once you get it started, once you get it kind of established, you can start to see the voids. That's the most important part about this, is that you can see the voids actually being pulled out. If you can't see those, then it's very hard to see because it's all clear, first of all, and then you're looking in between the channels, so you have to look through the channels into the middle of the pull to really see if it's being vacuumed out effectively, all the air. It takes a little bit to kind of train your eye to see it, but once you see it, you can kind of go as slow or as fast as you need to kind of keep up with it. So far, so good. I've got Bill Gates over here helping me out with the camera angles and everything. So we got to get you guys the best quality video possible. And then once we get about halfway, we're going to let it kind of cool, solidify a little bit. We're going to move the Bunsen down to this section right here. And then I'm also going to open up the tailstock and move it back on this piece of 50 mil just a little bit so we don't heat up the trucks too much. I love my American lathe gator, but it's a little bit short for some pulls, but we get by just fine with it. And it just pays off to take your time, go slowly on these. All right, we're gonna go ahead and move the Bunsen down and move the chuck down and everything. Kind of get resituated here. I'm gonna let it solidify just a little bit before I pull the chuck back. Go. Go. Maybe you got a little too warm there. Make sure it's tightened down. Start the lathe back up. And go ahead and get the heat back on there as quickly as possible. Just kind of, like I said, get resituated about halfway through the pull. You can see it's coming along really nicely. You can see that the void's getting backed out, and we've got a really good chunk right there already. So yeah, going really smooth. If you guys have any questions about my lathe setups or anything along those lines, please leave them in the comments. Try to answer all the questions. We're doing this channel though, so that you guys can learn as much as possible about what we do. So you kind of got to get it reheated again. Because once you have the core of it hot, because this is basically, right now, this is basically like 40 millimeter, 35 millimeter solid rod. So you have to get the heat into the core. And once you do that, then you can start to move that, start getting back and getting moved down. But since we took that little break, we just got to get the heat base back into it. I'm using the Vac Stacker by Jason Gordon. He sells them for $100. I think it's a great investment. That's what we're using right now to vacuum out all this. It's so quiet we can't even hear it. It's great. It's got enough suction to do everything that we need to do. Vacuuming again, like I said, I vacuum for about 10 to 15 seconds, and then I reheat for about 45 seconds to a minute. And I just do that the whole way down. I'm making sure that I can see the voids and where they're at, and I'm just following them. Not rushing it. You can't try to jump ahead of them. You just go down the entire thing very smoothly. Pays off to just take your time. The back stacker is also on a foot pedal, so you might not see me actually doing anything, but I am pushing the foot pedal to activate the vacuum. Let it cool down a little bit. I find that at the end wants to kind of get off a little bit if you don't let the back of it solidify. It kind of needs a bit of a shoulder once you run out of room on the mass of it, I guess. It's hard to explain, I don't know. You can see it kind of getting off a little bit, but it tends to get a lot worse if you don't let a little bit solidify before you get to the end. So now just keep heating, or I'll keep the vacuum on and stop heating. Kind of pull it out a little bit. Paddle a little bit. But that won't affect it too much once we go and stretch it down. And I always tend to leave a little bit of air in the end anyways, so we'll go ahead and pull it off to where it's a little bit cleaner. When you go to pull it off, make sure you don't use the vacuum anymore. Shucks, not gripping. There we go. Excuse me. Just kind of getting over a cold. Hopefully my voice doesn't affect it too much. Uh-oh. Like I said, we want to kind of peel some of this back because it has air, a little bit of air trapped in it. So you want to peel it back to where there's no air, and then we'll pony up and start stretching everything down. Whoop. Takes a lot of heat. Like I said, this stuff is really thick. And at this point, it basically acts as like a solid rod. When you do tear this off, it'll twist it because it's on the lathe, but it won't matter too much once you get it pulled down. Same thing with like a vac stack. You might see like little waves in here. Again, when you get it pulled down, you won't see those. Same with vac stacks with color. So let's see here. You can see it kind of got twisted there. So, but again, don't need to worry about that. What you do need to worry about is making sure you get all the crap off that has the voids, the air voids still in it. There we go. Get in there. Heat it up and straighten it out a little bit, and then we can go ahead and pull some of it. Okay. Go ahead and get this piece of 50 mil out of the tailstock here. To the side. Go ahead and chuck up. I like to use 12 mil solid to pull these down. Create a little shoulder too to make it a little bit thicker. Move it back. Okay. And this part is kind of just up to preference. I have a few different projects that I'll be working on this with, so I'm gonna pull some of it down to about 30 millimeters, and some of it I'm gonna leave at a little bit bigger, about where it's at now. So it just depends on kind of the project. I used to make little 7-hole slides with the little 7-hole screeds in them, and so I would pull this down to, well, like 10 millimeters. So you can make 200 slides out of this prep or something ridiculous. But for the projects we've been doing recently, I like to keep it a little bit thicker. And again, so this is kind of off again over here. Once we get it hot enough and kind of start stretching it, it should even out. I try to be careful about paddling it because you can actually flatten out some of the channels, like on the higher side. So you kind of want to be careful of that, but you can try different things to get it as straight as possible. Takes a really long time, like I said, to get the heat back into this piece because it's so thick, but again, we're just going to take our time, get a nice heat base, and then hopefully we'll get a nice stretch. Start to kind of pull it out, see what's happening, see where the heat base is, kind of readjust according to kind of what the glass is telling me. It's hard because we have this little 12 mil tube connected to something that's really heavy and meaty, and so you have to be careful not, this just wants to pull out when you pull the tailstock. So you have to be careful of your heat base and to get the most even pull as possible. Do kind of start to pull it again, see where it's. Okay, cool. You can see it straightened out down here. There's still a little bit of a knuckle there, but I think that'll be okay. I'm more concerned about just getting a nice even pull from there on back. This seems to be pulling out. Got a little bit of a hump here in the middle that will get evened out. There we go. Go ahead and pull this off and get it in the kiln, and then this other section I'm going to leave a little bit thicker, but I'm going to pull it down just a hair. Man, tailstock or the headstock keeps pulling out on me. And then we have a nice little section of the multi-hole tubing there. It's still pretty thick, probably about 32 millimeters or so. Go ahead and throw this piece in the kiln. Excuse me. Get another piece of 12 mil chucked up. Also going to pull this back because it kept getting pulled out. Give us a little bit more room. We might not necessarily need it on this one because I'm not pulling it down too far, but if you wanted to pull it down to say 12 mil or 16 mil, you might need more room depending on your lathe as well. Get this piece off of here. Okay. Go ahead and switch to the Red Max here. Work up a little bit of the shoulder here. Excuse me. Go ahead and shut the Bunsen off. Just try to work that heat into the core of this whole piece. Take a few minutes for sure. You need to make sure your Bunsen's keeping it hot enough for when you come back to it, it doesn't want to crack on you. Just working the heat in. Whoop. Well, that cracked off, so it looks like we'll just be keeping this chunk this thick. I could reattach it, but it is a pretty clean break. I think it'll be fine in the kiln, and we need some thicker chunks anyways for some projects that we have going on. So hope you guys learned something. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you like our channel, please subscribe. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you guys soon.